So Cursor 101, building lightning fast with GenDD. What the hell is GenDD? We'll talk about that in a second. But today I got Omar Shanti with me, CTO HatchWorks AI. I head up strategy at HatchWorks AI. We were supposed to have Luis join us from our labs team today, but he's got some fun PTO planned instead. So he's having more fun than us right now. But no, all right. So our goal today is to show you the core principles of building with AI. We call it GenDD at Hatchworks. It's just our methodology, what we've learned along the way as we're building with AI. And then you'll actually see it in action with Cursor. Like GenDD is not a thing that only works with one tool. It's tool agnostic in a sense. So the whole sense of that is just giving the base principles of what we've learned over time. And the way we see it, every company is now an AI and data company, and it's essentially potentially going to present the most transformative thing we're ever going to witness in our lifetime. Potentially a spicy take, maybe not for those that are playing with AI. I'm curious, Omar, do you think that's a spicy take? What's your take there?
I
That it's
mean,
going to be the most.
time will tell. Time will tell. I mean, but this is coming at the back of the low-code revolution, which has really built the aptitude in a lot of organizations for citizen development. It's coming on the back of many failed attempts at self-service analytics, with a lot of those lessons in the rear view now. And with the latest and greatest in the world of CMS, workflow orchestration, and search. So it is coming at a really great moment to be at the intersection of a lot of these people and process and technology trends. So I
Yeah.
think, Matt, the hype is actually the hype is correctly allocated here. This is transforming a lot, and you can see that when you go anywhere, right? Everyone's talking about AI constantly. Hence it being so refreshing to talk about Iceberg and Neon and some of these other sort of second layer things at this Databricks conference.
Yeah, time will tell if it delivers on the hype. I think this may be the one time it does. And sometimes things get overhyped in the short term, underhyped in the long term. I could see that playing out. But like, it's going to hit every fabric of every business from your front office, the solutions you're offering clients, your business in general, your business model, how you differentiate, your back office operational efficiency, reducing cost, increasing margins, and how you build software. And that's where we're focusing today, especially in Cursor. And they just had a really cool release recently with some new features, but it's kind of changing how you approach building with software. And this was an interesting report that was done, survey from HBS. And not so much interesting in terms of what use cases they listed on the top use cases of AI, but really these two, right? Generating code went from the 47th to the 5th from 2024 to 2025. But also the other little bit of nuance is they say for professionals, right? So this is not just like Joe Schmo on the weekend vibe coding something. These are like actual real professionals that are using these things. And like, we had a somebody from Stripe on the Talking AI podcast recently, and they're using it throughout the whole business on the engineering side, and then improving code for professionals. That's the other piece. They went from 19 to 8. So when you think about refactoring, fixing bugs, all of those things, you're starting to see these shifts at play.
Right. And I guess
And
one
yeah,
thing there as well is really the promise of MLOps. I was having this conversation with actually Sim Bahadur from Featureform. And really the promise of MLOps was models everywhere, right? And a few years back, there was all of the hype in the space around MLOps. And in a way, LLMs have delivered where MLOps kind of can't by embedding models everywhere, making them accessible via these really simple and straightforward protocols. And so, what you see over here in all of these use cases, as broad in the business as possible, is sort of the unfulfilled promise of classical ML of a few years ago being actually delivered with Gen AI.
yeah, definitely. Uh, and then you get some more spicy takes, right? So this is the CEO of Anthropic. He was quoted recently saying 90% of code will be written by AI in 3 to 6 months. I don't think that came true from when he first said this quote. And in 12 months, we may be in a world where AI is writing essentially all the code. But then you have, the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, had mentioned that 30% of their code is being written by AI. You have Mark Zuckerberg saying similar things in terms of how much will be written in the near future. Again, another spicy take. It's obviously coming from the CEO of Anthropic, which is Claude, which is the number one, you know, arguably the number one AI coding model out there. So he has a little bit of skin in the game. It could be a tactic. But Omar, I'm curious here too. What's your take on this spicy take? And then I think there's the balance between what's possible and what has actually came to fruition because change is hard, right? I think that's the big thing for a lot of folks, engineers, or anybody leveraging AI.
Yeah, spot on. I think adoption is always going to be the name of the game here. The old saying, of course, goes, your job won't be taken by AI, it'll be taken by someone who is using AI. Regardless of, the question of jobs, I think there's going to be this drive towards increased productivity and efficiency.
Yeah.
Those who are able not only to use AI, but to do it effectively are going to take the lead here. We're already seeing signals of that in the market. I think yesterday in the keynote, the CEO of Neon had mentioned that around 60% of every table that is produced in Neon right now is done through an agent. So only
Wow.
30 to 40%. And he predicts that within 2 years, 3 years, that'll be 99%. So it'll asymptotically be reaching 100%, right? And I think with code, there'll be some legacy standouts, more regulated industries, for example. But seeing things like Windsurf drive towards FedRAMP
Hmm.
approval means that they are expanding their market and they're bringing AI-based code generation to really sensitive sectors that otherwise couldn't. So I think, yeah, 90% of code on some timeline, definitely within maybe 3 to 4 years. I don't know about 12 months, but I'm not Dario, so I don't get
Yeah,
through those forecasts.
that's right. And it's funny that 3 to 4 years, 2 to 3 years, whatever you want to say on that side, is considered conservative for that big of a change. I mean, that frankly is mind blowing right there. And then like I always like to look at startups on the bleeding edge, and they're kind of forced out of necessity because they have limited resources. So this is Y Combinator's latest class. 95% of their code of what they were building was written by AI, and they're growing faster than any group ever, which is kind of crazy when you consider there's alumni of Airbnb and all these amazing names out there. But I think this is like an interesting thing because there's always that debate of like, is AI going to take over all the engineering jobs? But like you're an engineer, Omar. Like I'd be curious, everybody in the audience, like what percent of your time for our engineers out there is solely hands-on keyboard coding? And I'd imagine it's not like the majority of your day because there's a lot that goes into actually building a solution through code.
I mean, yeah, historically it's 30% coding, 70% Googling and Stack Overflowing.
Go, yeah.
No, but I'd say sort of as you progress higher up in terms of seniority, a lot of your time eventually transitions from just executing tickets to deciding what tickets ought to be built, to deciding what features ought to be built, to deciding what problems are worth solving. So you sort of take that practitioner to architect to tech leader sort of perspective where as a tech leader it's not sort of the tech lead position but as someone who's leading technology at their organization as a whole. And so your amount of time that you spend hands on keys drastically decreases throughout. And I think likely, one of the figures that we use a lot of the time is you can sort of get like a 30 to 40% improvement in the rate that you can deliver projects by only investing in unlocking your development teams.
Mhm.
You need to get rid of the product bottleneck, the QA bottleneck, the design, user acceptance testing, deployment, and user feedback, right? So it's a slightly different question, but if you say, what is the total time that coding goes into digital transformation initiatives, you'll find that that is actually the minority. And so if you unlock coding, but don't make progress on the other fronts, you won't reap total benefit. So what we'll see today in the
Yeah.
demo is how you can use Gen AI beyond just coding, how you can use GenDD. We'll get a taste of it in the product lifecycle, in the architecture side, as well as in the actual hands-on keyboard development side.
It's funny you mentioned the Googling and Stack Overflow. It was some post or video or something where there's the old saying like, our grandparents used to say, I had to walk 10 miles in the snow. The analogy here is like engineers don't know how good they got it. I used to have to spend hours and hours through Stack Overflow thread, from, Deep State Hacker 101 only to find out it doesn't work or something like that. But it's completely changing. And that's the thing too, like when we think of GenDD, like this is just what we've learned over time building with AI and we put a name on it, right? That's essentially what it is. It's our approach. And it's not just like the adoption of a new tool. I mean, it's a methodology, it's agnostic to the tool. It's more about the shift in the way we work. So what actually is it? So what I want to step through is like, and I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, Omar, to be honest, because I want to get to the fun stuff of you playing with cursor, but go through like what we've started to see as some of the core principles when it comes to building with AI. And Andy, if you want to drop in like the GenDD book, if people want to go deep, you can download that and check it out. But we've all heard of the term vibe coding, and it's, I'd say more infamous as of late. It's kind of like a negative connotation around it. And GenDD is not that. So if you think about like vibe coding, it's very ad hoc, no plan. AI is in control. It's hard to scale, hard to govern. It's based on vibes, right? GenDD is the opposite of that, right? It's a structured methodology, human in control, consistent results, defined guardrails and structure, auditable and engineered to scale. So like that's how we're thinking about this
Yep.
because a lot can go wrong if if you're relying on vibes to do enterprise type solutions, right?
I
Uh,
think one thing
yeah.
that sort of one thing that sort of demarcates vibe coding from GenDD and vibe coding from traditional coding is you willingly forego understanding the code, right? You don't care about what the individual letter of the code is as long as you understand the rough meaning of the code. What matters is that your AI agent understands it and is able to understand what you want
Yeah.
and is able to connect the two. So with vibe coding, you forego understanding and you just act based on emotions or vibes. With GenDD, we realize that that is absolutely not a way to build enterprise grade applications, right? You need to understand to intimate detail what everything is, and you need to be sure that it's delivering to the T all of the acceptance criteria that you require. Hence, building the structure and the methodology, human in the loop, sort of guiding, rather than human in the loop, we call it sort of human in the control, where the human is guiding the agent at various helps,
Mhm.
delegating, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, in essence, GenDD, so it's our aim to embed AI agents and agentic workflows throughout the whole software development lifecycle. And what's cool is like we're doing it from initial discovery, right? So it starts at the very early days, all the way through defining the product, user stories, building, testing, all the things. Like it's getting embedded throughout, and that's what we're seeing with companies that are starting to really adopt AI, and we just feel like it's a faster, better way to do it in a sense. Uh, yeah, so it's all about accelerating the feedback loop, the cycles. That's the thing. If it normally takes a cycle this big, using AI in the process, 4 times faster, whatever you want to equate. That's what the little visual shows. But obviously, it depends on the level of adoption and the use with the tools. But a couple core principles like this is the key things, regardless of what tool you're using. And frankly, this applies to just using AI, period, in a lot of ways. But if you're giving a garbage prompt in, don't be surprised when you get garbage out. Like you see a lot of people telling AI to do things with very little context and they're upset with the output. And there's a reason for that, right? And that leads into the first principle. So we have 6 of these we'll hit, and then Omar, we're going to jump into the fun stuff. But context is king. And you were just hitting on this, Omar, as well. The way to think about AI is like it's this superhuman intern that's eager and ready to go and can do just about anything. But if it doesn't have context for A, what you want to do, A, what you've already done, your organization, all those things, your existing code base, all of the different things it needs to integrate with, it's not going to do a great job because it
Mhm.
just doesn't have the context. And Omar, I know you were hitting some on that earlier. Any takes on the context side of things and maybe unique forms of context when you think about building?
Yeah, no, I think Matt, the metaphor that you provided of think of your AI, think of your agent as an intern, fresh out of college, maybe understands a little bit of some crucial things, able to give you a yes and sort of affirmative answer.
Hmm.
They will get up to no good unless you give them very clear instructions on what to do. And so, hand in hand with context comes the form of prompt engineering. So, prompt engineering is about maximizing the signal in a given context window so that you're not paying too much in terms of tokens, but you're maximizing your return. So think of everything here from giving API specifications to giving diagrams to giving maybe even like PDF files, raw PDF files, and having your
Yeah.
LLM be able to interpret those. We call that multimodal input, and that goes into giving it the context it needs to write the outputs that are best for you in your use case.
Yeah, and making sure the context carries through multiple chats as well. Like I give you one hack or whatnot, but if you give framing for what you want to build, that becomes context for uh, the agent, the tool, whatever tool you're in. You can save that as a file, and you can have it actually progress through and acknowledge of what it's done throughout, and then you can reference back to that so the agent AI understands where you are in the process. A great little kind of hack for that side of things. The other thing too, you are the orchestrator, AI is the executor. And we just hit on this. AI can do almost anything, but it needs clear direction. This is kind of the shift in role that we're seeing, and I think this is where a lot of people get um, uh, anxiety kind of increases because it's like I do the coding part. Like why am I outsourcing this to AI now? And you can't look at it in that way. It's truly a partnership. Like the way I almost view it is when I'm building with AI is just think of it as you're working with another human. When you frame it in that context, it's something just clicks in how you interact with it. Like I've gotten
That's
to the point where I'll even like tell it when I'm, hey, I'm gonna stop now. I gotta go do XYZ. I don't need to go tell it I'm gonna go eat dinner, but I do. But you start to like build that relationship with it over time in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things to note over here. One, you can think of an orchestrator. I love this metaphor because if you think about all of the individual members of the orchestra, they're all specialized in one very, very good thing, right? So you don't
Yeah.
have a maestro of every instrument playing each individual instrument. That's just wasteful. It's the same with building with AI agents. You don't need this amazing general purpose agent in order to do basic mathematical operations, basic SQL operations, and so on. You can achieve cost savings by orchestrating between different
Mhm.
executors who are specialized in one individual task. So, consider that sort of a multi-agentic system that we ought to drive towards for cost savings, for better outcomes too.
And that's the unlock is when you start to, it's not just I'm working with AI, it's this one singular thing, making it very specialized in a sense in terms of the agents, their purpose, their function in the task at hand is where it gets to be like kind of a next level thing. Third principle, build in tight feedback loops and keep scope narrow. You don't have to get everything in a single prompt. Practice chain of thought approach instead. So this is an important thing too. Like just how we mentioned earlier, you're not as an engineer writing code all the time. When you're working with AI, don't expect it to be writing code all the time either. I'd say when I'm just building random stuff, I'll spend probably, I don't know, 60 to 80% of my time actually talking and aligning with AI on what we want to do, talking through a bug, and I'll explicitly say, do not write any code, right? Because that conversation that you're having with AI becomes context for AI. So I think a lot of people just view it as, okay, write, do this code, build this feature, fix this bug. No, have a conversation with it. It's very important. And I think the other point on the chain of thought, kind of human in the loop approach, the interesting thing is with the reasoning models that have started to become very popular is that process and approach of AI kind of having its own feedback loops it's progressing through it can work autonomously in that fashion. So human in the loop, very important, but you can have it do a task and it's doing its own chain of thought reasoning through a process, which that also kind of becomes one of these like next level ups in terms of building with AI.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if you think about the checks that a human in the loop does, a lot of these checks can be delegated to the agent. So you can say, hey, here's the acceptance criteria. I am going to validate that, these acceptance criteria are each met by running these checks. The agent can then write unit tests or automated tests or any kind of specific tests on the pyramid to do that initial validation. So you don't need to do as much grunt work as you do
Yeah.
sort of quality control, taking maybe every battery, putting it in a machine to evaluate the charge, and then moving it on. Well, rather than have the human manually do that, maybe you have the agent do that and then have the human focus on something that's more specialized and higher value that is not just brute repetition.
Yeah, and what's interesting too, and you can do this in Cursor, but Codex comes to mind. It's OpenAI's new tool they recently launched, but you can actually have it go off and do tasks. So you can assign a bunch of tasks for it to do. But what's interesting it'll create its own branch within the repo, and then so it's not messing up the main branch. So it gives you something to review, and it has context for the things that are changing as well. So you can think of it as being instead of directly synchronous, there's asynchronous approaches you can start to take when you're building with AI, which you can kind of think exacerbate that out and it becomes kind of mind-blowing what's possible. All right, three more. LLMs make mistakes just like humans. So many people stop working with AI when they hit this point of making a mistake. Don't view it as this superhuman thing that is never wrong. If you think of it in context of almost being like another person you're working with, they'll make mistakes. LLMs will make mistakes too. Okay, that's just another opportunity for you to provide more and better context to the LLM, the agent, whatever you're working with. And again, your role is the orchestrator. Like you're there to validate, guide, help AI as you get closer to your intended goal. And we hit on this too, AI as a force multiplier. This is the thing too. You got to start thinking of it in this approach where you can have multiple agents doing multiple functions within a process and approach. You can do things asynchronously. And then you start to realize, oh wow, this isn't just like some stepwise change. This is an exponential thing you can start to integrate into how you build with AI. And just to keep us rolling, say, Omar, I want to see the cool stuff you're going to do. We got to have this Spider-Man quote. With great power comes great responsibility. AI can generate production-ready code at incredible speed, but it can also introduce vulnerabilities, leak data, violate compliance standards just as fast. And this is another important reason of like why it's like the antidote to vibe coding is how we like to focus building with AI.
Mhm. Yeah, well said. I mean, we don't have the luxury of just foregoing understanding when we're building for the enterprise. We need to be intimately aware of every minor detail in order for us to fully understand the compliance, the standards, regulations, and all of these requirements that live sort of outside of the code. So, what
Awesome.
are,
It, yeah, I
yeah,
think Omar, was shifted over to you now. So I'm going to stop sharing. And what I'd say too, like Omar's going to be doing some stuff in Cursor. So like while it's thinking through working, like drop in any and all questions you got. We already got a few good ones in there. Drop in the Q&A. We can hit some of those while AI is doing some of its processing and whatnot. And yeah, I'll turn it over to you, Omar.
awesome. Thank you. And so one of our favorite tools when it comes to, I mean, Matt sort of mentioned this at the start, which is it's well and good to talk about Gen AI, but it's even better to actually do stuff with Gen AI. And so rather than just sort of talk about the theory, it's important to actually get started. The space is moving so fast that the best way to sort of navigate that change is to be moving along with it. And we think Cursor is a really great place for everyone to start, hence starting with this Cursor 101 session quickly. And we're going to talk about GenDD. So the way that we use Cursor as part of our GenDD. Now, this is going to be sort of an oversimplification of GenDD. We do have deeper dive sessions on each of these sort of subjects, which we'll touch on, but we wanted to put a little something for everyone in this session. So
Yeah, hence the 101. I think that's a
hence
good
the
point
one.
too. If anybody wants to go deep, yeah, just send us a note.
Yeah. So GenDD, of course, tool agnostic. Our preferred tool is Cursor. Happy to get into more of that in the Q&A, but we just think that the feature set, how intuitive everything is, and the licensing, as well as just the performance. When you sort of use Cursor, you get a whole lot of IP that they've baked into the platform, and that just makes your development experience so much easier. So rather than try to reinvent the wheel, we think just using their primitives, using their IP is a great value add. So a little bit about Cursor. There's around 53% of the Fortune 1000 companies are using it in one way or another right now. And this is sort of cut off at a certain point. I'm sure the number will have increased since we reported this. Around 50K plus enterprises choose Cursor as their IDE of choice. It's got really great features when it comes to standardizing across an enterprise. And there's around 100 million lines of enterprise code written per day with Cursor. All in all, you take these together, and what we're seeing is an increased rate in the productivity and efficiency of how code is written, edited, and reviewed. Now, Cursor is built on sort of the Visual Studio Code IDE. If you're unaware of an IDE, think of just like a very sophisticated text editor, and that text editor is used to write code. The acronym is Integrated Development Environment, but again, just think of it sort of as a text editor. Everyone's got their own text.
It's like Canva for engineers. If we got any like product and design or business focused folks out there to draw the
No
analogy.
comment on that.
Was that sacrilegious, the comment I just made?
No comment. But so, your IDE is where you live. That's where you're doing all of your work. And different developers have historically had different configurations of their IDE, different colorways, different shortcuts, different annotations, and so on. When you use Cursor, not only can you sort of configure your IDE to look and feel how you want, but you can configure the brain of the LLM, so to speak, in order for it to act the way that you want it to do. So what you can do is create something called rules. And these are awesome because that means that everyone across your team within your enterprise can be leveraging the same rules to have the similar behavior. So your user rules just sort of define your own personal coding standards and preferences. These follow you from project to project. So let's say that you're working on a web API, a microservice, and you're working on like a database or a Terraform script. These are all just different parts, totally different sort of skill sets. You might say, well, no matter what I do, I don't want to use tabs. I prefer spaces. Or you might say, I always want to leave documentation with this specific format, or I always want my GitHub commits to have, the user story number. You can define those in the user rules, of course, and it'll follow you from place to place. With the project rules, on the other hand, those are project specific. So you might say that within this API, everyone is writing unit tests and everyone is validating that they have 90% code coverage. So you can enforce coding standards around style, around functionality across a project and have your whole team sort of use that as well. We take good advantage of both of these at HatchWorks, which we can talk to more in the Q&A. Now, memories are an interesting thing. Memories are sort of a new feature that have been rolled out with the 1.0 release, as far as I understand. And the idea is the more that you interact with Cursor, the more it can sort of learn your behaviors and it can sort of personalize its approach to you. So you can, rather than manually need to tell Cursor exactly what you want out of the user rules and project rules, Memories helps bridge that gap by saying, well, you might not always be able to word exactly what you want, but we can infer and personalize to you. So really exciting stuff. This is your IDE talking back, which is a brand new paradigm we've never seen before. But enough talking, let's jump in. Let's actually see this firsthand. So I'm going to share another tab here. So just give
And
me
while
one.
you're pulling that up, Omar, I'm
Yes.
curious, folks in the chat, let us know who's actually used Cursor before, and then let us know, would you regrade your skill level, beginner, novice, expert? I'm just curious to see where folks sit on kind of the spectrum of having used it before, or if you like, use another tool, GitHub Copilot, Windsurf, whatever. Let us know in the comments. It'll give us a good sense for the audience and whatnot.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. All right. So what we're looking at here is Cursor. This is, I believe you can see it. Matt, can you give me a confirmation?
Yes, I see. Yeah, we got it. Prompts on
Perfect.
the
Yeah.
left-hand side.
Yeah, so this is Cursor, and effectively, sorry, I'm getting this chat thing in the way. I'm going to move that over. What we're seeing over here is our code editor. I don't have any files open, but I've got my file directory open over here. So you can see if I hover over this, I've got a desktop, my desktop, I've got a folder called demo, a folder called code within that, desktop demo, miscellaneous, prompts, and strategy. These are all of my folders. I don't have anything in code yet. We're going to generate that. In MISC, I have just a token that I need. I'm not going to open that. So hackers, you can hop off now if you'd like. And then under prompts, I've got the actual prompts that I'm going to give Cursor because as Matt said, it helps to be thorough in your prompt and no one wants to watch me type. So I've gone and created these ahead of time. And a strategy folder, which I'm going to populate here. The way that Cursor works is you have sort of let me sort of create a new file over here. I'm going to call it test.python, for example. Historically, you can go in and you can sort of def test print hello world. So notice all of the autocomplete over here, right? Um, I've basically what I've gone and done is I've just created a test hello world Python script. That's pretty cool. But notice over here, Command L to chat, Command K to generate. If I hit Command K, I can tell it, edit the selected code. I can have it generate more code. So I can say, generate a class for a pet. And it should effectively generate all of the code that I need for,
That's
this
cool.
individual class. So think of
So that's like in line with what you're doing in a sense.
exactly.
Uh,
Think
wait,
of
I only use the agent. I'm very what do you call it?
this is
Non-engineer focused user. This is cool to see.
yeah, think of autocomplete on steroids. This is what we call
Yeah,
inline
yeah.
generation. I can accept, I can reject, or I can sort of edit. I'm going to reject it just because I don't need it. And now what I can do is if I hit Command L, what it's going to do is actually open up a window on my right-hand side or a panel on the right-hand side with reference to this test.py file or any other of the files that I want to give it.
Hmm.
And I can also connect it to tools. So I can connect it to Git if I wanted to. I'm not going to do that. I can connect it to my terminal, to the web so that it does some research and so on and so forth.
And
Um,
back to the principle, the first principle, context is king. All of the things that Omar just mentioned is context, right? You're adding context to whatever you want to do, whether it's calling out a specific file or using the web or any of those other things.
Perfect. And so I'm going to tell it, create detailed documentation for this and do it as a pirate. And notice what it's doing right now is it's generating a brand new file for me. It's generating this readme.md. It's asking me whether I want to accept it or not. And
Do do pirates write better code? Is that the persona we should all be using?
I think so. I think so.
Okay.
At least it makes documentation more interesting. And so, voila, I've now got this README, which is directly built on top of my test.py. So, it's awesome. I can accept, I can reject. I'm going to accept it, and then I'm going to just delete both of these two files. I suppose before I do that, it stands to, it would be beneficial to just explain one other thing, which is within Cursor, you have the ability to swap between different modes. I've been using the
Hmm.
mode, and the agent mode really empowers Cursor not just to do FAQs, but to take action. Um, the ask feature allows me to ask Cursor questions about my code base. So I can have ask, I can point at task, I can say, guess the average number of years in the field of the person who wrote this, right? And it's going
That's kind of an example of like not having it write code where you can talk to the LLM essentially, right?
exactly right. So within this ask mode, I can ask questions. This is sort of a dummy example, but let's say that I'm just inheriting a project that we have either acquired through a company or we inherited from open source, and I'm just trying to understand it. Or let's say that I'm a new employee and I'm trying to onboard and understand the code base. Well, using the ask functionality, I can just like that enter into FAQs with my code base right away. What happens is when you open an app in Cursor, it's going to index your code base, it's going to understand it, and it's going to make FAQ
Hmm.
seamless. And so you get the benefit of all of that right away.
I got
And
to stop you right now, Omar. We got a comment in the chat. I think it may just be the host and panelists, but Dewey said pirates are better coders, or why are pirates better coders? Do you know the answer to the dad joke?
oh, I don't know.
They know they're they really know their arguments.
Are
Arguments.
argument.
There
Okay,
we go. And we
perfect.
got lots of questions in here too. Let me hit one of them for
Got a
you,
lot. Okay.
Omar. Do you typically use auto or do you choose specific models? So that's kind of down in that
Of that,
uh, the chat down towards the bottom.
who
You
asked
let
that?
it just.
That's a great question.
That's a good
Thank you,
question. Yeah,
Ryan.
it is.
Ryan, yeah, thank you, Ryan. So
Yeah,
that's
there we go,
wonderful.
Ryan.
What Ryan is mentioning is effectively over here, you can see auto. This is the selection of model. I can go here and I can pick anything from Claude to Gemini. And there's a whole bunch of other models which I can access by going to File and then, sorry, cursor settings here, models. And I can sort of toggle the models that I want and I don't want.
Hmm.
Now, what's awesome about this and what's so great about Ryan's question is the beauty of Cursor is that you're not locked into any model. You're not you're sort of model agnostic. You can even bring your own model. So let's say that I wanted to run this directed at a local instance of Olama or something that I've fine-tuned and that lives on my Bedrock. I can do that within Cursor.
Hmm.
There's one small asterisk that I'll put there. If anyone's interested, we can speak more in the Q&A. But I can put it at any model. The challenge, though, is that Cursor is super opinionated. It has a lot that it does behind the scenes to help formulate and massage the query that goes into one of these models. So Cursor you can think of as having these connectors, these adapters that take your code base and take your prompt history and fine tune the prompt that goes into any of these. So when you use Auto, you are basically telling Cursor, hey, I trust you. I trust the way that you handle everything. And
Hmm.
let's run with that. Alternatively, though, you might say, well, I know Claude 3.5 Sonnet is the best. It's the best price value. I want to stick with that, or same for DeepSeek or something. So, my experience is historically I only use 3.5 Sonnet, but now Auto's gotten good enough that I just use Auto.
Yeah, I guess auto can optimize when you think about it from like a cost perspective as well, because it's kind of looking at
It
what
does.
it would need for the query to need a reasoning model. And I'll say Claude 4 more expensive. I think you get limited use, but man, that thing is good. If like you have a big problem you're trying to fix, or you wanting to like build some new feature out and you want to start with that, really good model.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I think one thing to call out as well is you'll notice within the cursor settings, you've got this little brain icon, which what do they call it? A thinking model, I think. That's what, yeah, Claude Sonnet for thinking O3.
Oh
Anyways,
yeah, it's kind of the reasoning models. Yeah.
yeah, but it's sort of it's not too comprehensive because the GPT-4 and the 4.1 they don't have it. So I think and the Claude 3.7 Sonnet doesn't. So what I think is really going on is this is sort of an indication of cursor support for these models as opposed to something inherent to the models itself. Here, this is sort of the perfect indictment. Claude 3.7 Sonnet and Claude 3.7 Sonnet with the brain. So I think if you wanted to get really low into the weeds, the cursor community is great at handling those questions. For 99% of users, though, auto is enough.
Yeah.
Um, while I'm here, though, I think it's cool to just bridge over to rules. So within rules, I can enable memories, although that's in betas, but I can create those user rules and project rules as we were talking about earlier. So let's hop over to, is it here? Let's hop over to what is known as the cursor directory real quick. And from the cursor directory, we can search for rules that map to the kind of work that I want to do. So in the coming session, how much time do we have left? 20 minutes. Yeah. So in the coming 10, 15 minutes, I'm actually going to start writing some code. And so it's valuable for me to identify what kind of code I'm writing and then figure out which of these languages I want to go after. I've come here earlier and I've sort of pre-selected this one, which is a DevOps role. You're a senior DevOps engineer and backend solutions developer. This is some information on Bash scripting, some information on Ansible and Kubernetes. The truth is, this is pretty much overkill for what I need for this demo, but I would use this if I were actually building a project, or at least I would use a variation of this. And because these are project level, you'd want everyone in your company to align on what these are and to tune them. So if you have any shared libraries, security regulations, API naming conventions, right, you'd
Hmm.
take all of those here. What we are going to use though is the this one is the senior front end developer and an expert in all of these, and then this one is expert in Solidity, TypeScript, Node. Um, I'm gonna go and just grab this one real quick. So I've gone and copied this. Coming back over to Cursor, I'm gonna plug that into my project rules, add rule, and then I'm gonna call it I don't know, full stack dev. And I'm just going to drop this over here, hit save, and we can see now I have a dot cursor rules with this saved in it. That's just going to constantly get appended to the context. Okay, so powering ahead here, I'm going to do a little bit of garbage collection. I'm going to drop both of these things here. Um, at the start of the call, we were saying that we want to accelerate the time to feedback loop, right? We want to accelerate the time it takes to get an idea all the way through to POC. And that does not only involve code, that involves doing some initial requirements, gathering some deep research, generating user stories, generating an architecture diagram, generating a plan, and then really starting to write some code. Historically, people don't think of Gen AI as assisting with those early things, but I think that that's sort of an oversight. And so I've gone and created a few prompts. The first prompt is generate project requirements. This is in Markdown, so I'm going to pull this up. First, persona settings. You're a digital product owner and a senior strategist, 10 plus years of experience. And here's what I'm doing. I'm building a SaaS application called Plot IQ. This is a fictional startup that I've created, and it's targeting the CRE industry. And they're looking to help investors evaluate properties by centralizing a bunch of data and then building in underwriting tools. So it just helps to solve for this a scattered data landscape with spreadsheets, systems, PDFs, and so on, and giving a unified property evaluation experience. I give it some information about the architecture. I'm a technical person, so I'm pretty opinionated about this. Others won't be so opinionated. And I tell it, here's a high level of the features that I want to do. Notice how little information I give it, right? I'm going to recruit Gen AI to go and flesh out my vision for me, which we'll see in a moment. And then the objective, I'm not trying to get it to create the user stories yet, because there's going to be so much content and that's way harder to review. Instead, I wanted to generate a one-page product requirement document that outlines what the MVP of this should include, right? Because I'm sort of telling it the future state. This is what I want in the future. I want it to tell me here's what the MVP is, and so on. So with this, I can now go and I'm going to just expand these folders, the strategy, because this is where the file is going to live. I can go and hit Command L and open this new chat. I'm going to hit the agent here, which is what I want. And I can tell it just as simple as execute this file, or, read the contents of this file and execute it. This is a markdown file. Markdown files don't get executed, right? So it's gone and it's read the file. And now it's going to sort of create everything that I need. So it's gone and created a strategy directory for me. Now it's going to create the project requirements document with a clean professional format. It's gone and done that. Created a comprehensive, and basically it's just sort of telling me, and it's asking me, would you now like me to adjust the required documents? Let's take a look at this. Plot IQ addresses the fragmented nature of commercial real estate industry, eliminates the need for multiple tools, streamlines property evaluation. And then here's the MVP, a single property lookup with comprehensive data display, interactive parcel map visualization, user interface, technical architecture, cool, React via TypeScript, backend database, UI UX. Okay, so this is okay, but I want it to be more exciting, right? So I'm going to tell it, adjust the design principles to be more exciting, more sexy. Think like, I don't know, Steve Jobs, Y Combinator, startup hype. I want to build a unicorn here. So I'm taking massive liberties with my prompts over here, but because I've grounded it in an actual prompt that is very real, this generate project requirements, it should be able to just take my more casual coaching and still give me like a good product. And so I can see over here what has changed. It's great because it sort of shows me 15 lines removed, 29 lines added, and these are the lines that have changed. So if I were to exit this and then open it up again, I can see under the vision and design principles, like this is just a lot more fleshed out.
Hey, one question for you, Omar, too. We got one. Any tips or advice on keeping the original specs consistent with these tools? I think it's kind of hitting on what you're talking about now. You have your spec document. I think one thing too is like when you're building anything, any product, things are going to change, requirements are going to change. So that's something you can have Cursor essentially update as you go on, build upon in a sense. But any thoughts on that in terms of either keeping the original spec consistent or updating it as you go on?
No, I think that's spot on. I like prompt engineering is the art of telling the model everything that it needs to know in order for it to execute the task at hand.
Yeah, that's good.
Either
Yeah.
bake that into the individual prompts, you can bake that into sort of higher order prompts like these, or you can bake that into the cursor rules directory like this. But it really comes down to leveraging your fixed size context window, which by the way is always expanding, and
Mhm.
leveraging maybe some higher order techniques within your context window, such as context caching or pruning or so on, and memories within Cursor if you're so inclined, and having that carry all of the signal that you need, right? So it's about maximizing the signal for the minimum context. Let me know if that doesn't answer the question. I'm happy to get more practical if needed. But so yeah, I'm happy with this. So now I'm going to tell it, no, that's great. Execute the one generate user stories.md file. Execute this file now. And what it's going to do is go and create user stories for me. It's gone and created, first, let's create the necessary directory structure and then generate the user stories. So
That's cool.
within code, it's going to generate API database DevOps front end. It's not exactly the behavior I wanted. I would have rather those go under the strategy folder, but that's okay. I can probably have it adapt in a second. Um, and so just gonna jump to this prompt that I gave it. Oh no, here, there is a user stories folder where it is generating those user stories. How did I? Okay, it just generated.
And I hope that's a moment too for folks like thinking through like Omar's not even really having it necessarily write code right now. You're having it define the user stories. Then you take things like MCP, you could connect to Jira or whatnot. Then there's other functions you can start to accelerate in the software development process.
That's right, yeah. Right. So right now it's doing some of the initial product work. It's giving us a first draft of something that might take, a long time to round up all the stakeholders to do. So, all right, I've given it sort of a template for what a user story should look like. And then I'm giving it some instructions. I'm telling it, hey, this is a full stack client server app. Start by generating an architecture diagram based on the requirements. And so you can see user story number one is create an architecture diagram. And then you can see that these have a name 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they're sort of divided into swim lane. It looks like the Gen AI model thought it makes the most sense to create the architecture, do the front end setup, API setup, database setup, and the Docker Compose setup before then going and building sort of the Hello World front end and the Hello World database. Sorry, Hello World API and Hello World database. So I think that looks good. I agree with that general direction. I'm going to accept all of these. At this point, I could slow down and I can just review them, make sure that they all look good one by one. Because this is a live demo, we don't have time to do that. So I'm just going to close those. And now I'm going to add the context of the user stories directory. Sometimes this takes a little bit of time to load. So I'm going to go files and folders, user stories. Yeah, all right. So still hasn't been indexed on the folder level, but that's fine because I can see I've got all of the files, right? So I can say add user story number one, architecture diagram. I could say execute this first user story. And it's going to create a directory for the architecture documentation under this docs folder, cool docs architecture. And now it's going to create a plant UML diagram that shows complete system architecture. I'm not going to accept it yet. I want to see if it does anything else. I need to visualize this. I have a browser window open where I can visualize it, but I also have Plant UML installed on my local machine. So it ought to be able to generate a graphic for it. So let me tell it, generate a graphic for this using my terminal. It
And
ought
why that next
enough to do this.
prompts
Yeah.
processing, one question we got, and we got a plus one for it. And this may be one worth a follow-up after the webinar, but how do you help an enterprise understand data security using these tools? It's a constant pushback we get. So I'm assuming other stakeholders in terms of like allowing the adoption, it's that data security one that gets a lot of pushback
Yeah, I know
with these
it's
tools.
It's a fantastic question, and that's actually the one thing that I talk time and time again about with clients as well as with providers like Claude, like Cursor and Windsurf. So this is having an issue over here. It's not exactly well, it just while I was talking, it tried a few things. It didn't work as well. So firstly, it installed the tools. It tried to generate the diagram. It realized that there's an error in the diagram itself. So it tried a simpler version of the diagram, generated it, found another error, and then finally got this minimal version working. And now it is building it back up. And then so voila, this is basically the architecture diagram that it generated, this plant.
Hey, look at that.
But sorry, I just wanted to call out this sort of agentic action to take actions and then to validate its own outputs. The next step could be I could say, hey, take another look at this diagram and make sure that it validates, validate that it actually reflects the use case. Anyways, so how do we deal with data security over here? There's sort of a spectrum of posturings when it comes to security. Some clients might say, I am uncomfortable with any data leaving my VPC. So if you are maybe you are entirely in a sensitive and regulated industry and everything is not yet on the cloud, but on your own VPC on premise, right? So how do you use a tool like this? That is probably the most restrictive thing, and we can talk about that one. The second is the more open one, which is maybe you're on the cloud and you're happy to use your hyperscalers provided services. So if you're on AWS, you're happy to use Bedrock, whether you're on AWS Gov or classic AWS, like public AWS. Or you're happy to use Amazon Q, which is a higher level abstraction on top of an LLM. The more open posturing then is to say, I'm okay with my code leaving my VPC as long as I have the guarantee that it is not being stored, it's not being trained on, it's not being persisted. It's being processed temporarily and then sort of dispatched. And then fourth is the most open, which is like, I don't mind. We're a startup in a non-regulated industry. My IP is not in my front end. My IP is in my relationships. I'm okay to use a windsurf or a cursor just like that. So depending on where you fall within those posturing, there are different steps that we can take to sort of to get you where you need to go. Yesterday, I was, as I mentioned, having extensive conversations with Windsurf, who are very soon going to release a FedRAMP version of Windsurf that basically means no data leaves the Gov Cloud. So if you are on Gov Cloud, that is a great solution for you. Cursor right now and will for the foreseeable future take every single request that we type in here and send that to their own APIs, to their own Cursor server, which they will then use to optimize the query, optimize everything before it then goes to your LLM. So even if your LLM is running locally or on your on-prem environment, things go to the Cursor cloud first. Cursor, though, gives a guarantee that it doesn't store, doesn't persist, doesn't train on any of that data. And with the Cursor Enterprise version, you can sort of have Cursor, you can have Cursor pointing to LLMs on your own VPC, right? So you can get additional steps of security. And then with something like a company that is already on the cloud that is looking to reuse a Bedrock or something like that, you can sort of remove some of the abstractions of these IDEs and use a more low level IDE that does sort of context caching on your device, that does indexing, file indexing on your device, semantic search on your device, and only sends the needed snippets to the LLM. So that's the
Mm.
sort of self-contained model where no data goes to a Cursor or a Windsurf cloud, even a FedRAMP version, but it all lives on your device. It's just computationally expensive and requires more storage. So the short answer is we have a whole suite of different go-to-markets which revolve around your own security posturing. Let me know if that doesn't answer the question, though. Again, happy to dive in further.
Cool. Gets anything else you want to hit in Cursor? I know we're getting close to time. We can definitely go a little longer, and we got more questions in here as well.
We've got 4 minutes left. Let's just maybe jump through with one more story. So we've got the architecture diagram, perfect. If I tell it execute the next story now, um, it ought to sort of search and identify what the next story is. In this case, it recognizes that the next story is to set up the Docker environment for the front end. And notice that I didn't specifically allude to that file. I did that deliberately, right? So,
Yeah.
it's going to go and it's going to execute this, it's going to scaffold this.
I
And
love this structured approach you're taking though, in terms of, it's not just willy-nilly type of thing. There's a process to it. One thing that's kind of related, we got a question from Laura. I've seen a lot of AI tools degrade with rounds of revisions, sometimes around 7 to 10. And I've noticed that specifically in Cursor too, within a chat, and it relates to the context window, you can see things degrade sometimes. And there's certain times where you may want to open a new chat. Any thoughts on that and approach you take? I've seen people kind of like always start a new chat when they're doing a new feature or doing something different. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so but for anyone who's sort of monitoring the tab, it's gone and asked me to credentialize with Git so that I can install the Shadcn UI React. I'm telling it, hey, no, I don't want to do that. Just Dockerize things already so that I don't need to deal with dependencies stored on my environment. And it's changed approach, and it's going to go ahead and do that. But yeah, no, when it comes to revision, I think the issue is unless you are taking good initiative, sorry, unless you're taking good care at pruning your context, then you might have so much stuff in there that it's hard for them to
Hmm.
separate what matters from what doesn't matter. So
Yeah.
garbage collection is crucial in LLMs as much as in non-LLMs here. Um, all right. So effectively over here, what it's gone and done is under code. And I think this was on the front end side. It's gone and scaffolded a project for me. And so I can run this with this Docker run script, which I'm gonna just go over here to my demo and then go to code. And meanwhile, Matt, while I do this, any questions? Any more questions?
Yeah. Let's see if there's another one we want to hit. Uh, let's see. There's one question somebody had around they were doing a project in Lovable and they were moving it over to Cursor. Any
Okay.
thoughts on approach to do that, or also what do you carry over to kind of keep the context? I guess one way is if your project is in GitHub, you can reference and kind of clone from there in a sense
Totally.
to move things over.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's a workflow that we do very often for greenfield clients. So we want to get out the door fast. Lovable is, in my opinion, optimal for those greenfield sort of implementations. And so, I mean, there are, I think, some security considerations to keep in mind with Lovable as well. If I remember right, the Replit team were able to identify some issues in Lovable management. So we sort of need to be very, very careful about that. But ultimately, Lovable is a great product. And for the Lovable to Cursor migrations, yes, you go Lovable GitHub, you pull down, you go to the Cursor directory, and you grab something that sort of on the project rules side imitates what Lovable typically does, which is typically Vite and React and so on. And then you can just iterate as much as you'd like within Cursor. Fortunately, if you push back onto GitHub, Lovable will then grab that and pull it in, and then you can sort of do more work within Lovable. I just find that Lovable has a ceiling, a pretty low ceiling, right? So once you want to start doing things like API integrations with your custom environment or authentication, or once you want to Dockerize it and deploy it in, conjunction with other services, you need Cursor and the control of your own IDE more than Lovable.
Yeah, and
Okay.
real quick too, I know we're at time and we can keep going for those that want to stick around, but we do have GenDD training we do if you want to go like deeper than this. We obviously hit the treetops, so we have an offer specific to this group. If you want to check out GenDD training tailored to your organization, I think we shared the ebook as well. And there's a survey too. Just wanted to hit that for folks that may need to jump to another meeting.
Yeah. So if we were to fast forward and just keep pulling this thread, this is where we end up. We end up
Is
with
this the Betty Crocker version that you did beforehand for
this
the
is the
use
better
case?
version. Yep.
Look at that cake. It's
Yeah,
beautiful.
this is where you end up in the end. You've got some kind of framework. I think this is called,
Wow, that's cool.
I remember right. And it basically goes and creates some information around two demo locations, one a commercial office, one a retail space.
Yeah.
Sort of proves out the underwriting capabilities over here, where you can sort of calculate just a few key metrics based on some input properties, which you can get from up here. And these are all, of course, stubbed except for the map. The map integration is real, hence the token that I was alluding to earlier. And I think that's mostly it. So to recap, I guess what we've seen so far is we've recruited Gen AI not just as a coding assistant, but we've recruited it as a product owner, as a solutions architect,
Yeah.
as a technical PO writing user stories. We've had it do DevOps work and even sort of adapt its approach. It QA'd itself as well, and it did some front end work. None of this removes the need for a human in the loop, but all of this just accelerates the time and gets something out the door quick and makes your team able to do more with less. So thank you.
Let me ask you this, Omar. How long did it take you to create what we're seeing on the screen? Just for context. I mean, you did what we were doing in live in about, 20, 30 minutes. But how long did this take?
Like 2 hours.
Yeah. So it's that's wild compared to what it would take otherwise. One cool thing that Luis Rodriguez dropped in the comments around the privacy stuff. There's a privacy mode you can enable in cursor settings, and zero data retention will be enabled, and none of your code will ever be stored or trained on by cursor. So that's another like tactic when you're thinking around the security standpoint and trying to make the case for why you should be able to use this tool that, tons of other enterprises are adopting and using, right? That shouldn't necessarily be a limiting factor in a sense.
Yeah, that's correct. The challenge though is that your data is still going to the cursor cloud, or your code is still going to the cursor cloud. So
Yeah.
is that is acceptable, then that is sufficient, but you don't
Yeah.
get.
Well, cool. I think we will wrap it there. I know there's some questions we didn't get to, but we'll get the history of all those and we can follow up with folks. And there's a survey too if you want to let us know how the session went. And I think we can wrap it there.
Thank you. And that was just the 101 session. All of the deeper sessions go a lot more into the weeds, a lot more practical too. But we hope that everyone was able to take something away.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend. Happy Father's Day to the dads out there.